Some years ago I made a video of UserBenchmark. If you don't know UserBenchmark, you should, because it's a very good website. And I was basically watching and reading their reviews, let's call it that, reviews, and they were pretty laughable. And some days ago I watched some news that UserBenchmark would be behind the paywall, so I thought to myself, maybe UserBenchmark improved and they don't really hate AMD anymore, because they weren't actually pro Intel or pro Nvidia. They were just anti-AMD.
Why?
Anything that was from AMD could be the best product in the world. It would be a crap for this guy, the supposed CPU pro that makes the reviews on UserBenchmark. Well, let's start with the Ryzen 7 7700X, for example, the review that the CPU Pro does. And it starts with, within minutes of the first pre-release 7000 series UserBenchmark results, AMD's Marketeers broadcast a 20% win over the 12900K via thousands of anonymous Twitter, Reddit, forum and YouTube accounts. First of all, yeah, I don't believe that the 7700X was claiming 20% win over the 12900K. If I remember correctly, it was the 7950X that was 20% faster than the 12900K. And it was in fact 20% faster in multi-threading in the applications that they showed, like Cinebench and some others. So it's reality. If you go to some video reviews of Gamer Nexus, if you go to some video reviews of Hardware Unboxed and so on, and some other very nice reviewers, you'll see that this isn't false. It is actually true. So yeah, buying new AMD products is like buying used cars. It takes time, experience and taste for sales hype. Buying new AMD products is like buying used cars. It's difficult for consumers to make rational choices while AMD completely dominates sponsored news and social media channels. My goodness, I mean, I know this was written in 2022, 2 years ago, of course. Even some time ago we had some reviewers saying that Nvidia was actually pressuring them to release some ray tracing results, otherwise they wouldn't send cards and so on. And yet this guy has the nerve to say that AMD is the one that completely dominates the sponsored news. Man, this guy is mental to say the least. But anyway, let's keep reading this piece of shit article. 10 years ago, when AMD was the underdog, this type of marketing was understandable. Today, with the capitalization of 150 billion US dollars, it's disrespectful to AMD's own users. Even with Intel's marketing department asleep at the wheel, because they are in fact, Ryzen will quickly end up in the same state as Radeon. This was 2 years ago, and the current Ryzen CPUs are, well, they are outselling Intel CPUs by quite a lot, and they are indeed, for example, if we look at the X3D, for example, it is much better overall. It just performs better. It has less power consumption compared to, even if we compare to the 14th series that came after the 7800X3D and the X3D series from AMD. Now we'll have the 8000 series, which will have an improvement over the 7000 series, of course. So even then, in 2022, he was saying that Ryzen will quickly end up in the same state as Radeon, which is obviously false. This guy is once again mental. Following a series of overhyped releases, consumers have little interest in the Radeon brand. Now, okay, this is a CPU review, but he is quickly switching to the Radeon brand. The hate is so much that he just can't simply stick to the topic. He needs to talk a bit about other things, like, once again, Radeon. The combined market share for all AMD's discrete Radeon RX 5000 and 6000 GPUs, Steam stats, like Steam is the overall thing for everything, it isn't obviously, is just 2%. In 2022, the AMD's discrete GPU market wasn't like even 10%, it was above 10%, so saying that it was just 2% is just lying, pure lying. Although the new 7000 series N4 CPUs are actually around 15% faster than their predecessors, which is once again can be true and can be false. If we're talking about the 5000 series X3D, like the 5800X3D and so on, well, they are more or less on par, 15% faster, let's say. But if we're talking about, let's say, real 5000 versus real 7000, the difference in some scenarios is way above that. There are some games where the 7000 series are like 20-30% faster than the previous generation. So saying it is only 15% faster, yeah. They have a hefty cooling requirement, TDP plus 16% versus 5000 series, which is once again not true, because the power consumption that they have compared to the 5000 series didn't increase as much. And by the way, I just want to clarify this, because he says it has over 60% increase in the TDP because he's comparing the Ryzen 7 7700X versus the 5700X. Although the 7000 series do not have the 7800X, and the first and original 8-core 16-thread CPU from the 5000 series was indeed the 5800X, and the 5700X was released like a year later, like a year after or something like that, and it was kind of a lower power draw version of the 5800X. So if we're comparing generation versus generation, the 5700X should be compared with the 7700 non-X instead of the X version. So it would be 5800X versus 7700X, so 105 watts TDP versus 105 watts TDP, and then the 5700X versus the 7700 non-X, which is once again the lower power version of the 7700X, and is also 65 watts TDP. So the TDP is the same, this is just bullshit, as usual. The only thing that increased were the temperatures, and basically the temperature limit, because AMD stated that the 7000 series can work up to 95 degrees all the time without throttling for a single second. In multi-threading ability, in multi-threading workloads, it can go up to 95 degrees and it won't throttle for a single second and it won't break your chip, okay? Basically, they just increased the maximum temperature of the CPU. So TDP plus 16% versus the 5000 series is just bullshit. 30 seconds BIOS post times. Now this was a thing at the beginning, really this was a thing, so on this part he isn't lying, because the BIOS the BIOS booting times were actually very bad at the beginning of the AM5 architecture, the M5 socket. But I can show you right away that for now, for example, I'm running the M5 setup, you can see, with the Ryzen 7 7700X, and if we go to the startup apps, or in this case, yeah, startup apps, last BIOS time 15 seconds, and 15 seconds is actually more than it should be to begin with, but still it isn't that bad. 15 seconds last BIOS time. As expensive DDR5 RAM requirements, and only work with expensive motherboards, which is, well, the motherboards were indeed very expensive back then, they aren't anymore, thank God. Despite the 7000 series struggling to match Intel's outgoing 12th gen, AMD marketed it as a future-proof platform, which is actually true compared to Intel platforms recently. They want users to pay a premium for last generation performance in exchange for the shallow promise of upgrades in the future. Over the next few days, Intel's 13th gen Raptor Lake will launch. Shoppers will do well to wait until then. On that, I can agree. Despite AMD's Neanderthal marketing techniques, it's hard to not admire their technical progress. He shits on AMD all the time. Most of the statements made here are completely irrational and are completely they're just lies. They're just lies. But in the end, he says it's hard to not admire their technical progress. Choose one, dude. Decide yourself. Pick your side. But this makes no sense, and then he goes a little cocky, AMD Raptor 4 and Intel Zen 13. Yeah. But this is actually an old review, so let's go to a more recent one with a 7800X 3D, which once again, as known by any decent reviewer and from people that actually have the CPU, it is the best price performance chip that you can get in terms of gaming. And even if we go to performance solely, it is still one of the best, if not the best performance chips that you can get for gaming. So Let's take that in mind. The AMD 7000X 3D CPUs have the same core architecture as the rest of the 7000 series, but they have one group of 8 3D cores with extra cache. Okay? The 3D cores are priced higher but run at 10% lower clocks. Now, the 3D cores aren't priced higher. The CPU is priced higher, not the cores themselves, but run at 10% lower clocks, which is true, but is saying this in order to make it look bad. For the most real-world tasks, performance is comparable to the 7000X variant. More and more applications, even on the professional side, more and more applications are using more and more cache, and in those applications the 7000 series X 3D are much faster than the normal 7000 series. And real-world scenarios, well, gaming is a real-world scenario. People buy these CPUs to game, and as we know, this is one of the best gaming CPUs that you can get. Cache-sensitive scenarios such as low-resolution canned game benchmarks with an RTX 4090 $2000 benefit at the cost of everything else. Cache-sensitive scenarios such as low-resolution canned game benchmarks with an RTX 4090. This is just lying. Stop lying!
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
Be wary of sponsored reviews with cherry-picked games that showcase the wins, ignore the frame drops, and gloss over the losses. I mean, the frame drops. What frame drops? One of the best things of having more 3D cache, in this case more L3 cache, is that you have less frame drops, because you don't have to interchange as much data with the RAM as you did before, because you have a bigger amount of cache, so more instructions just stay in the cache instead of going to the RAM and then going to the CPU. So the overall smoothness, we have higher average FPS, but the 1% lows and 0.1% lows are much better as well. That's one of the big things of having the X3D CPUs. Even on Windows you can feel that the latency is way lower, once again because we have way more L3 cache. I don't really know what this dude is smoking, but he's smoking some good shit. Also watch for AMD's army of Neanderthal social media accounts on Reddit, forums and YouTube. They'll be singing their own praises as usual. Why is this guy insisting in calling AMD Neanderthal? What's his own fetish with the Neanderthal world? Does he want to be a Neanderthal or something? Because Neanderthals weren't as stupid as people think. Neanderthals were actually very intelligent. For the time at least. They weren't as low IQ as people think, but AMD continues to develop advanced marketing relationships with select YouTubers with the obvious aim of compensating for second-tier products with first-tier marketing. I believe it's the opposite, actually. I believe it's the opposite. AMD, for example, AMD sent me cards before. They're not sending any more cards, at least not a huge amount of cards. They send some, but I have to send them back. But they never told me anything about the reviews. They just sent me the cards, and they never said a single word of do this or do that, or you have to do this or you have to do that. Never. And on the other hand, we heard from several YouTubers that Nvidia was sending them cards, but they were actually telling them, well, this is how you have to review it. So that's bullshit on this scenario. And I actually think that their marketing is actually bad. At least on the Radeon side, their marketing is actually bad. So they don't have the first tier marketing. It is actually the opposite. They have second to first tier products, second tier drivers in some scenarios, or at least let's say second tier features, let's say that, not drivers, features, and the marketing is definitely second tier. So I believe that's more the case than first tier marketing with second tier products. PC gamers considering a 7000X 3D CPU need to work on their critical thinking skills. Influencers are paid handsomely to promote overpriced niche products. X3D, Epic, Threadripper. Epic is for servers, dude. Is for servers. Nobody's getting paid to promote Epic for servers because Epic is much better than Xeon. It costs less and performs much better and usually consumes less power. So nobody's gonna buy Xeons, and that's why the Epic marketing doesn't need to be there. Epic CPUs sell themselves just on the base of that. Anyway, Rational gamers have little reason to look further than the $300 13600K, which offers comparable real-world gaming and better desktop performance at a fraction of the price. Workstations and RTX 4080 Plus gamers may find value in higher core CPUs such as a 16-core $400 13700K, and if you're talking about gaming, it means that the E-cores are useless. Most people even disable them because once again they're useless for gaming. And on the scenario, gamers also care about temperatures, and gamers also care about power draw, and in those scenarios the 13700K isn't really optimal. I do think that even nowadays the 13600K is one of the best CPUs that you can get. You can get it on a cheap motherboard or decently cheap motherboard, and it is a very good performance. A very good performer, sorry. And I believe that nowadays AMD and Intel are actually switched on this department because like a decade ago, AMD was the way to go for best price performance, and Intel was the way to go for the best performance alone. And nowadays I believe once again that they're switched. If we go to the mid-tier market or below that, so low to mid-tier market, Intel now has the best price performance CPUs. Let's say even with the 14th series or the 13th series, especially i3s, the Intel is the way to go. Intel is the way to go on that scenario. And if we go higher than that, you might actually want to go with AMD because they offer the best price performance on the higher tier, while Intel offers the best price performance in the lower tier. For gaming alone, we're talking about gaming. So it's an interesting note to take in consideration. Despite offering better performance at lower prices, as long as Intel continues to sample and sponsor marketeers that are mostly funded by AMD, they will struggle to win market share. I need to read this again. Despite offering better performance at lower prices, as long as Intel continues to sample sample and sponsor marketeers that are mostly funded by AMD, they will struggle to win market. This has to be one of the dumbest shit that I've ever read. Ever. First of all, Intel was the one known to buy sponsors, not AMD once again. So the AMD hate kicks in all the time with this guy, with the CPU Pro. And secondly, I mean, if Intel was actually sponsoring them, which implies that they're doing the same as AMD, they should be gaining market share because the reviewers should be showing better results for the Intel CPUs. It's a contradiction because he's saying that in one hand, AMD gets more market share because they're sponsoring. On the other hand, he says that Intel is also sponsoring but doesn't get market share. So something's wrong there. If Intel is also sponsoring, if both are sponsoring, why is one gaining market share and the other one is losing? Maybe it's because of the products and prices. Now to finish the CPU part, let's go to the Core i7-13700K. Intel's 13th Gen Raptor Lake CPUs offer around 10% faster gaming and 45% faster multi-core performance than their predecessors. False. It's like 5% faster, 10% faster in some scenarios in gaming, and I mean, in terms of multi-core performance, it is not even close to 45%, which is annoying and kind of cringe to say the least. The new CPUs are compatible with DDR4 memory and Z690/B660 motherboards, 150 motherboards once again, which is a good thing. That's one of the things I like on the Intel side on the previous generations, is that they support DDR4 and DDR5. On the other hand, you have to buy DDR4 and or a DDR5 motherboard. If you want to change to DDR5, you need to get a new motherboard. And DDR5 motherboards aren't that expensive anymore, so anyway. But this was written on October 2022, so yeah, it's understandable. Now listen to this. The 13600K beats AMD's flagship 7950X in gaming and almost matches the 7900X in multi-core performance. First of all, the 13600K doesn't really beat the 7950X in gaming. As shown by Hardware Unboxed, for example, in terms of overall gaming, it tested lots of games. The 13600K is not beating the 7950X in most games, okay, in gaming. As for multi-threading performance, though, the 13700K performs very well, and mostly, yeah, I believe that it matches the 7900X in multi-core performance, because once again, it has the E-cores that don't serve much for gaming, but in terms of multi-core performance, they actually help quite a lot. In terms of multi-core performance, the Intel CPUs consume much more power, as it has been shown, of course, but once again, they perform very good in terms of multi-threading. Extreme workstation users may find value in the 13700K or 13900K. Yeah, extreme workstations won't use these CPUs. They'll most likely just go with CPUs with more real cores. Once again, like the 7900X and so on. But you do you, I guess. Gamers on a tight budget can save $40 with a 13600KF, which is a 13600K without integrated graphics. And once again, gamers on a tight budget won't get the 13600KF or the K. They will get lower end CPUs. That's what means being on a tight budget. Although Ryzen 7000 has weaker multi-core, weaker single-core, higher platform costs and higher unit prices, AMD have a 3D joker up their sleeve, the 3800X 3D, via advanced marketing on YouTube forums, Reddit and Twitter. AMD will demonstrate that their upcoming CPU is the best in the world, and in matter of fact it was the best in the world in terms of gaming performance. They were demonstrating it well. And other proof by way of a small handful of obscure workloads. Games that few people play, example Factorio, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, will be cherry-picked, video footage of the gameplay settings won't be provided, and frame drops will be conveniently ignored. That's why we have third-party reviewers that show this was once again false. This is just pure AMD hate. This playbook has easily outsold Intel in the recent years, and yeah, they outsold Intel in the recent years because they have better products. But with every overhyped release, consumers lose trust in AMD. Yeah, AMD actually increasing their market share over the years proves that this is wrong. Users do not lose trust in AMD, they gain trust in AMD and lose trust in Intel. But anyway, based on social media / press coverage, you would never guess that the combined market share of all AMD's Radeon, once again, we're talking about AMD CPUs, but this guy just can't stop talking about AMD GPUs. He loves AMD so much that he needs to talk about AMD Radeon as well. All of AMD's Radeon 5000 and 6000 GPUs amongst PC gamers is just 2.12% Steam stats, and once again, the market share numbers are completely wrong and false. This is bullshit once again. Meanwhile, Nvidia's RTX 2060 alone account for a whooping 5%. Okay, largely thanks to marketing incompetence, Intel is existentially motivated to deliver material annual performance improvements. Consumers can look forward to Meteor Lake 14th generation in less than a year's time. But this is not the worst part. We know that this guy hates AMD CPUs, that's for sure. But in terms of AMD GPUs, so let's start with the RX 7800 XT that was selling very well, even comparing to the RTX 4070, because it was overall a faster card and it had 16GB VRAM versus the 12GB VRAM on the 4070. So once again, it was overall faster, as you can see on this video that I released, for example, that you have both compared, and it was considerably faster in rasterization, slower of course in terms of ray tracing, in some cases much slower, in some others just a bit slower depending on the ray tracing implementation, but overall it was a faster card with more VRAM and costing less. And even then, this guy says first-time buyers tempted to consider the RX 7700 and 7800 XT by AMD's army of advanced marketing scammers. Now they are scammers. Now it is not Neanderthal marketing, is just directly marketing scammers. And this was in September 2023. So anyway, advanced marketing scammers, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, forums, basically everyone is against Nvidia and Intel besides UserBenchmark. UserBenchmark is the holy grail where nobody is biased. According to, of course, GPU Pro, nobody is biased on UserBenchmark. But Everyone on YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, forums and so on, everyone is biased there, just not user benchmark.
Always lying to me.
Should be aware that AMD have an history of releasing benchmark busting, heavily marketed sub-standard products. And on this, I actually have to agree to some extent, because the numbers that AMD released for RDNA3 were actually way better than they came to be in the end for the 7900 series. But for the 7800 XT, the numbers were actually on par with what the third-party reviewers said, which is the actual truth. Although Nvidia's 4070 only offers comparable performance, which once again, yeah, we can agree to that, it has a broader feature set, RT and the LSS3. I mean, we have ray tracing on the AMD card, so this shouldn't be here. You could talk about the LSS3 and frame generation, but now we have frame generation on the AMD side as well, with only the FSR upscaling being considerably worse at lower resolutions than the LSS, obviously, and offers far better game compatibility drivers. Far better is really a stretch. Far from far better, just better. PC gamers looking to join AMD's 2% GPU club.
Stop it. Get some help.
Steam Stats 5000, 6000 and 7000 series combined market share. No. They are around the 10%, 12%, which is of course not much compared to the Nvidia side, definitely. Nvidia has the domination here, but saying it has 2%, Steam charts do not show the full market. AMD's 2% GPU club, Steam Stats 5000, 6000, 7000 series combined market share need to work on their critical thinking skills. Influencers posing as reviewers are paid to handsomely scam users into buying inferior products. Now, this guy is not only calling everyone else scammers, but he is also calling the users, the AMD users, he's also calling AMD buyers stupid. That's basically what he's saying. He's saying that they need to work on their critical thinking. Basically, if you bought AMD, you're dumb, you're stupid. Even if you're getting paid to do this, it's kind of sad. It is kind of sad to say the least. Now remember the 4060 Ti. The 4060 Ti was one of the most crapped on, let's say that, one of the most crapped on GPUs of the past years. Trashed by every single reviewer, and with reason. It was barely faster than the 3060 Ti in most scenarios. Look at what this guy says. The RTX 4060 Ti is based on Nvidia's Ada Lovelace architecture. It features 4,352 cores with base boost clocks of 2.3/2.5 GHz, 8GB or 16GB of memory, a 128-bit memory bus, 34 3rd-gen RT cores, 136.
A few moments later.
While all the AMD products started with "this is how much inferior AMD products are," or "AMD products suck," or they cost too much, or they have inferior architectures, on the Nvidia side we start with actual characteristics. That's something entirely different from the reviews that it does for the AMD CPUs. The 4060 Ti is around 12% faster than the 3060 Ti at the same MSRP, which false. It is not 12% faster, not even around that in most scenarios, and offers similar performance to the 3070 at 20% lower MSRP. Once again, according to third-party reviewers, the 4060 Ti was not at the 3070 level and was usually below that, and that's why it costs less. Since the 4060 Ti has only 128-bit memory versus the 256-bit on the 3060 Ti, it is only around 6% faster than the 3060 Ti at 4K. According to some reviewers though, the 4060 Ti at launch was actually slower at 4K than the 3060 Ti, so it is not faster. But anyway, this will not concern most gamers who are best off playing at 1080p. The 8GB variant is easily the better option, as games rarely use more than 8GB. We were in May 2023 and this guy was still saying that games rarely used more than 8GB, which is obviously false. And first-time buyers tempted to consider the RX 7600, 6800 by AMD's army of advanced marketing scammers, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, forums, etc. should be aware that AMD have an history of releasing benchmark busting, heavily marketed substandard products. This is really hard to read because this is such bullshit that really annoys me. We were talking about the Nvidia card, the 4060 Ti, and then he immediately goes to the 7600, 6800, which doesn't even make sense. It could go like 7600, 6700, but no, 7600 and 6800. And the 6800, for example, was costing more or less the same as the 4060 Ti and was much faster across the board, not even comparable, much faster, and the 7600 was not even competing with the 4060 Ti. The 7600 was much cheaper, of course, $269 MSRP if I'm correct, so it was much cheaper and it performed well within 20% of the 4060 Ti, so once again, it was much cheaper. And the 6800 was much faster at the same price, so this doesn't even make sense, because we already had like 1 year of third-party reviews when the 4060 Ti was released, or even more than that, more than 1 year, so once again makes no sense, this is just complete bullshit. The 4060 Ti is more power efficient, quieter, so being more power efficient doesn't really mean that the card is quieter, because you can have a card that isn't as power efficient but has a way better cooling solution, and that means that it will be quieter. But anyway, has broader feature set, RT DLSS 3, okay, and offers far better game compatibility drivers. And once again, he can't keep his mouth away from AMD. PC gamers looking to join AMD's 2%, once again, the 2% bullshit, GPU Club Steam stats, 5000, 6000, 7000 series combined market share, need to work on their critical thinking skills. Once again, influencers are paid handsomely to scam users into buying inferior products, straight up lying time after time after time, and at the same time, it keeps calling AMD buyers dumb asses, like saying need to work on their critical thinking skills time after time after time. This guy should be fired ASAP for UserBenchmark. It is such a bullshit website that nobody should be using it at all. Nobody. Just go to the well-known sources. We have lots of well-known sources across the years, sources that have been here for more than 10 years, and they do easily bring you way more accurate results and real results in more scenarios than these guys. And well guys, we could be reading things like the 7900 XT review that once again this guy is shitting all over the AMD cards. Once again, like he loves to do, AMD cards, AMD CPUs, but then this video would be like 1 hour. And this is really, I don't want to make a 1 hour video, and this is really bad. I mean, our benchmarks show that the 7900 XTX lead the 6950 XT by around 30%. First of all, your benchmarks mean shit, because you didn't do any benchmarks. And if you did, you'd know that at 4K, for example, the 7900 XTX is at least, and I'm using the reference version, not an AIO version, comparing to the AIO version of the 6950 XT that is quite faster than most versions. At 4K, the 7900 XTX is around 40% faster, not 30, 40% faster. And if we go to professional workloads, or if we go to encoding, decoding and so on, the 7900 series are much faster than the 6900 series. Much faster. Of course, it is not 50-70% like AMD claimed, and they need to be called out for that, but it isn't 30% as well, and your benchmarks don't really mean much. Anyway, yes, we see once again that this guy, at least, the GPU Pro that does the reviews for the UserBenchmark website, is completely nuts. He doesn't really care about what AMD brings, if it is better or not. He's not pro Intel, he's not pro Nvidia. Once again, he's just anti-AMD, and I do not and I can't advise anyone to take UserBenchmark as anything else than a joke. With reviews like these, is a joke and should be banned ASAP. Nobody should be watching this with name calling like Neanderthal technique, Neanderthal marketing, calling AMD buyers dumb, idiots and so on. So this guy shouldn't even be working here, and this website is nothing less than a joke. And well guys, that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video. Also leave your comment in the comment section with your opinion. Let me know if you watched the whole video or not, because I really want to know if you watched all of this crap or not. And really, don't forget to leave your comment in the comment section, because I really want to know what you think about UserBenchmark. Because it talks like all the other reviewers are biased and bought by AMD, while the case is actually the opposite. He is the only biased, or one of the only biased reviewers. There are biased reviewers for sure, but this guy is definitely not an unbiased one. He is biased to the bones, and we can see that by his own writing. But he speaks like all the other ones are the biased ones, and he isn't biased, which is obviously, once again, a lie. Jesus Christ. Anyway, once again, thank you a lot for watching. One more time, leave your comment in the comment section, guys, and see you in the next video. Cheers.